I'm Eric Scarpati with NSSF, the Firearm Industry Trade Association. This episode, we're going to be taking a look at what NSSF is and what it does. We'll also dig deep into attempts to track firearm-related purchases through new credit card merchant codes and the executive order on gun control recently issued by the Biden administration. I'm joined by NSSF President and CEO, Joe Bartozzi. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks, Eric.
So first things first, NSSF. I know we could probably spend a lot of time on this, but we really can't get into every detail. But if you could just give me the elevator pitch and people will get an idea of really what the organization is all about.
Sure. National Shooting Sports Foundation is the Firearm Industry Trade Association. And what I like to tell people is we advocate, we educate, and we communicate on behalf of our industry and our members in terms of business, commerce, marketing, safety programs, best business practices. We have a whole host of programs in this area, and would have a lot to unpack there for sure.
So tell us a little bit about your career up to this point.
I spent a lot of years in manufacturing. Almost all my career was working in manufacturing, quality control. I worked for a contractor to a couple of gun companies back in the day, back in the early 80s, and that really got me fascinated about firearm manufacturing. Went to work at Mossberg in 1986, spent 32 years there in a variety of quality, managerial, and technical roles, and eventually became the executive vice president and general counsel before moving on to NSSF.
So yeah, back to NSSF. Really, if we could take a little deeper dive into those programs and things that we do for the firearms industry, but also we do some stuff for gun owners and their communities as well. Could you just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, just a couple of brief points on that. Obviously, the biggest endeavor that we do is the SHOT Show. And this is where we bring in thousands of exhibitors to expose them and their products to people from over 100 countries every year. And we have this opportunity for media to come in and talk about new products and opportunities to increase business. So that is really a good thing for a trade association to do, is to help promote and market the industry itself. But on the consumer-facing side, we've got programs like Project Child Safe. A lot of people don't maybe know our regulatory stuff, our regulatory compliance, but they know Child Safe because we hand out free locking devices and safety kits. We've given over 40 million of these in the last 20 years. So there's that Project Child Safe information that people can use immediately to securely store their firearms when they're not being used, to learn about safe practices when they're hunting or when they're out target shooting. So it does have a definite impact on the consumer-facing part of this. We also have a Don't Lie for the Other Guy program, which is based with our retailers, but also impacts and educates consumers because it warns them not to lie to pick up a gun for somebody who is prohibited from having a gun, because that is a crime. So we're educating them, hey, don't lie for the other guy, because if you do, you may end up in prison. So these are types of forward-facing, consumer-facing things that we do, amongst many others that we could spend the next 3 hours talking about.
Right. So some of these things that we deal with outside of our programs, but maybe, legislatively or just stuff that affects the industry. One of those things we're dealing with is credit card merchant codes right now. So credit card merchant codes, kind of an obscure thing, but it has big implications for both the firearms industry and for the consumer. This is essentially merchant tracking codes for when you make a purchase, correct? When you purchase a firearm or fire-related product, there's a special code that's related to that, and that could then be tracked. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
Yeah, there are a group of people that I would say are instigating this to try and, for lack of a better term, peek into your basket at the checkout counter if you're buying guns or ammunition. They want to know who you are and what you're buying. Now, perhaps it isn't yet as granular as that, but it certainly is the first step to that sort of thing. And from our position, even the first step is a step too far, because by doing this, you are creating a class of basically undesirable people that are buying guns and ammo, right? So why would you want to look and see what they're buying? Why would you do that? Why would you single these folks out? It would have a chilling effect on folks' rights under the Constitution. Certainly it would have an effect on privacy. What you're buying is your business and not the credit card companies or whoever they may choose to share that information with. And you might call it a backdoor registry, right, to take an inventory of who's buying what and where they live and who they are. So it's a very serious problem. We're pushing back very hard on this thing to stop it in its tracks and to see that it doesn't see the light of day. But it is just one more attack on law-abiding gun owners trying to do the right thing by going to the retail, doing their purchases with background checks and so forth.
So what is NSSF? What's the current state of things? Really, what is NSSF doing in about it right now?
Yeah, very recently we learned that the credit card companies have paused this initiative, which is really a good thing, and I hope it stays paused forever because it isn't right. What we are doing about it is we're calling awareness to it at both our member level and at the consumer level to make sure people are aware that this is happening and that it's a very, very serious thing. But also we're working with state legislatures and at the federal level as well to try and create legislation that would ban the use of this information or ban the collection of this information. So we're trying to be both, we're being affirmative and proactive in trying to get it stopped. And we're also perhaps defensively saying if you use this information, there would be punishment for these companies. Now, we don't want to get crosswise with anybody. We're trying to do the right thing for our members, but this is a bridge too far. This is unacceptable and an abuse of power by, I think, these companies in large part.
It's not something that we really see with any other kind of products either. It's something special for firearm-related products or firearms themselves.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any other category that would be scrutinized like this. And we know from listening to some anti-gun politicians that this is the first step. What they really want to know is how many rounds of ammunition are you buying? What type of firearm are you buying? How many are you buying? And that's really, that even, again, goes further and does create a registry of who's buying what, where, and when.
Which is not allowed under our current Constitution, correct?
Well, under the Constitution, the government can't do it. Right. But this might be a backdoor way for other organizations to get hold of that information if the credit card companies are doing it. So there's all sorts of moving parts and all sorts of intricacies to this issue, but nonetheless, the concern is very real and it's significant.
Does this also sort of turn into credit card companies, since they know we could see what business firearm companies are doing, what kind of firearms are sold, they could kind of turn off the ability for our industry to do business with credit cards? Is that a concern too? Well,
it is a concern, and we're seeing it right now with banking discrimination happening against the industry. There are insurance companies that won't write business in our industry. So we're already seeing this type of discrimination take root. And yes, a credit card company could theoretically say, and maybe it even isn't very theoretical, but they could say, we don't want you buying that type of gun. So we're going to decline, we're not going to allow you to go forward with that purchase. I mean, that is a real thing that could seriously happen. And again, we think that the credit card companies have seen the light in terms of this is a really bad idea because there are roughly 80 to 100 million law-abiding gun owners in this country, and I don't think you want to, aggravate or infringe on the rights of a substantial percentage of your customer base. And I think they know instinctively this is not the right thing to do. This is a bridge too far, and it does infringe on people's privacy rights overall.
Probably not the last we'll see of it. Hopefully the pause, or some action we take could kind of stop this from something that becomes in effect. But how does really the NSSF prepare for such, I guess, with attacks like this? How do we see these things coming, and how do we typically deal with them?
Well, there's no shortage of attacks coming at the industry, and it has been the case for decades now. We're seeing, politicians and some in the media finding new and creative ways to attack the industry. What we do at NSSF anyway is we really pay attention to the details. Some people might call it reading the tea leaves. We see what's happening. We see what's being put out in the media, and we are in communication with legislators from around the country and on Capitol Hill as to what they're hearing and what they're seeing. And we compare notes with other groups that are similarly situated to NSSF. I mean, I say that figuratively, not necessarily literally, but we certainly move in the same circles where people are talking to each other, and we gather intelligence based upon these types of communications, these type of outreach, and this type of feedback from our friends around the country. From there, we then develop, we try to sort through what's real and what is not, and then we try to get in front of these things as much as humanly possible. Sometimes that's not always possible. Sometimes you get caught unawares, and then we have to react, but that's just the nature sometimes of this. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you get caught surprised. But either way, we have a series of processes depending on what the threat is and how it affects the industry in general as to how we're going to proceed through this thing. We fight with litigation. We sue. Sometimes we support litigations already ongoing. Sometimes we work at state capitals or on Capitol to enact legislation to try and either stop something bad from happening or to get something good to actually happen. So we have a playbook with a number of different options, and we use those based upon what's best for that particular situation.
All right. Well, thanks, Joe, for kind of giving us the overarching view of what's going on here. Appreciate you being in.
I appreciate being here. Thanks, Eric.
All right, welcome. So now we're speaking with Patrick Rothwell, NSSF's Managing Director of Government Relations and Federal Affairs. Patrick, there's a lot of reaction and concerns right now around President Biden's executive order on gun control. So let's just really get right into it. And can you sum up for us what were the specific provisions within the executive order and which provisions are NSSF most concerned with?
Happy to do it. The executive order that was released March 14th goes through several different provisions, things that the Biden administration wants to employ. Largely, however, this is kind of a retread of things that are already existing law. Congress passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act last year, and this is kind of, like I said, a retread of that. There are some new things in here which we are going to keep our eyes on that may be concerning. There are some things for individuals that, I think would be a little bit concerning. But largely, these are things that he has the authority to do under existing law, and there's nothing really groundbreaking here. So, we're concerned about certain things. For example, there's a new provision where he's directing the Secretary of Defense with the Attorney General to implement principles to further firearm and public safety practices through the Department of Defense acquisition of firearms consistent with applicable law. We're not clear what that's going to do. That's something that we need to keep an eye on. It's a little bit concerning. But a lot of this other stuff we've seen before. I would say that at the beginning, he never misses an opportunity to slander the industry, despite the fact that we've done several things. We've done more than any other industry in terms of advancing public safety and keeping guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. So on the one hand, the first paragraph, he'll talk about the interests of the manufacturers and how it's inconsistent with public safety. But then on the other hand, later on, outline certain things he wants to do, which the industry is already doing. Promoting the safe storage of firearms, for example. We've been doing that for 24 years now. Thanks. Welcome to the party. Engaging with common carriers and shippers to ensure that firearms don't get lost or stolen in transit. We've been doing this. It's already federal law. We have to report on firearms lost and stolen in transit. So, it's nothing terribly groundbreaking. But again, there are certain things that we're going to certainly keep an eye on.
Okay, so it sounds like a good number of these provisions cover what the industry already does, or really that they're already federal law. But outside of those provisions, what are some of the areas that have like potential impact for manufacturers and retailers?
The other one I would bring up is you've seen this at the state level with some states suing the firearms industry, trying to find an end around to the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act by using public nuisance statutes at the state level to go after manufacturers claiming, marketing practices. There's a provision in the executive order that would direct the Federal Trade Commission to publish a report about how manufacturers are marketing firearms. They say to minors, we know that's not the case, but also say how such manufacturers market firearms to civilians through military imagery. I'm not exactly sure what the Federal Trade Commission can do on that, but this does line up with some of the efforts to, sue manufacturers at the state level, and they're trying to replicate that at the federal level.
Yeah, that sounds like a big one. Are there any others to keep an eye on?
Yes, that's a big one. I mentioned the one with the Defense Department before. We're not exactly sure how that's going to work. There are some other question marks about out of business records, and there was a provision in the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act about engaged in the business and clarifying what that definition is, and it sounds like he's going to try to further clarify it. Again, Congress just did that less than a year ago, and now he's trying to do something more. I think one of the biggest takeaways is really indicative of the president's inability to really move the needle on stuff, especially with a divided Congress. House Republicans are in the majority now, and despite the Democrats having the majority in the Senate, it's only a 51-49. So things are really difficult to move with slim majorities in both houses and then controlled by each party. So, he'll call on Congress to do certain things, and he's saying he's going to do X, Y, and Z, but they're, largely already either in practice or current law. But yeah, I certainly keep an eye on the Federal Trade Commission, just because that's something that we've seen at the state level.
So which of these orders should individuals or the average gun owner be concerned with?
Sure. Red flag laws. There's a provision in there about encouraging the use of existing red flag laws. And I'll say, the position of NSSF has always been, we're happy to look at proposals for extreme risk protection orders, provided that they afford individuals, their proper constitutionally protected due process rights. Of all the red flag laws that have been enacted at the state level, they all fall short of adequate protections. So that's a concern. It's less of an industry issue and more of an issue for individuals. But if they're going to be promoting those existing red flag laws that don't have the due process protections, that would be something that individuals should be concerned about.
All right. So what steps can NSF take to combat some of these, and really what can industry businesses, employees, and gun owners do about it?
Yeah, I think the first step is always, with the separation of powers, we're going to engage with our allies on Capitol Hill and lawmakers. If we're right now in the midst of appropriation season, so if there are things in here that the president wants to do that the Congress does not think is appropriate, they can always withhold funding. What we've seen so far early in this Congress is, especially on the House side, the Republican majority's interest in conducting oversight hearings. ATF has not yet been called up to Capitol Hill. They're going to be, both from an appropriation standpoint and from an oversight and judiciary standpoint. So what we're going to be working with them, we would encourage, NSSF members as well as individuals to contact your congressman if there's something in the executive order that you find particularly objectionable. A lot of the stuff I laid out, contact your member of Congress. And then if it gets to the point where litigation is necessary, that's something we'll consider. But I'm not, we'll see. I'm not sure. We're not going to go there yet. And it's going to be, that's a decision that we don't take lightly. But I think most of the stuff will be able to provide an adequate check with a separate but equal branch of government.
Okay. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for rounding all that up for us. That's it for this episode. Please like our video and subscribe to our channel, but also ask your questions, because we want to be able to have you involved in our future episodes. If there's an issue or some kind of topic that you want us to address, just ask the question. We'll get to as many of those as we can in our future episodes. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.